the guardian of Hillpine. Hillpine was a quiet, mostly white town nestled between the blue hills of Virginia. The kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, and the biggest commotion in a week might be a deer wandering too close to the school fence. But under its peaceful exterior, tension often simmered silent but present. Whispers, looks, and sometimes ugly words. At the far edge of town stood an old stone house, solid and unshaken by time. Few in Hillpine knew the man who lived there. He walked with a cane, wore worn boots, and moved like he carried the weight of more years than his graying beard suggested. His name was Sergeant Elijah Brooks, or just Old Eli to those who bothered to know. Elijah was a black man who had served 20 years in the U.S. Army, including multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He earned medals, carried shrapnel in his leg, and returned home to find the country he defended didn't look at him the same way he looked at it. Still, he chose to settle in Hillpine, his late wife's hometown, and live quietly. Few knew what he did with his time. Some said he was a survivalist. Others thought he was just crazy army. The truth was, Elijah kept busy. He ran a free boxing gym for at-risk youth in a neighboring town. He fixed bikes for kids who couldn't afford new ones. And at night, he patrolled the streets not because he had to, but because he believed no child should fall asleep to the sound of fear. One autumn, tension in Hillpine started to rise again. A group of teenage boys, bored, angry, and steeped in the hate they inherited, began targeting Elijah. At first, it was words shouted from trucks. Then, paint sprayed on his fence. Finally, one night, they showed up with baseball bats. But Elijah wasn't afraid. He stepped out of his house slowly, leaning on his cane. He didn't raise his voice, didn't curse, just stood there still, steady, unbothered. The boys hesitated. Then one of them, Chase, the ringleader, shouted, "Why don't you get out our town, old man?" Elijah looked at them and said quietly, "I've bled for this town. I've bled for you." They laughed, confused. "I served 20 years in a war so people like you could spit in my face," he continued. "And I still came back to protect us?" One sneered. Elijah turned and pointed down the road. Smoke was rising. The community center was on fire. A short circuit had set it ablaze, and inside, 2 children were trapped. Elijah had heard the call on his emergency scanner and was already on his way when the teens showed up without another word. Elijah hobbled forward. The teens, dumbfounded, followed. When they reached the fire, the kids' screams were real, raw. Without hesitation, Elijah handed his cane to Chase, covered his face, and charged in. He came out 5 minutes later, coughing, arms wrapped around 2 trembling siblings. Paramedics arrived seconds after. The children lived. Elijah collapsed in the hospital. The teens waited. They learned everything about his military service, his volunteer work, and the fact that he had personally paid for the food pantry the community used weekly. Chase cried the hardest. He said nothing when reporters asked him why. He just shook his head. The next month, Hillpine changed. Not overnight change, never does. But a mural appeared on the gym wall in the neighboring town. It showed a black man with a cane standing between a burning building and a group of kids. Beneath it were the words, "Courage isn't color." Its choice the teens volunteered at Elijah's gym after school. One of them later joined the army. Another studied firefighting, and Elijah? He returned to his quiet patrols, his steady presence. When asked why he still did it, he said, "Because this town is my home, even if it had to learn it the hard way."